Before you believe that love either survives distance effortlessly or collapses under it, understand this. Sometimes it is in the waiting that hearts reveal what they are truly made of. And for Daniel Harper and Amelia Carter, the weeks apart were not dramatic storms, but quiet tests of patience, trust, and resilience that unfolded beneath different skies yet carried the same emotional gravity. Amelia's West Coast photography tour began in San Francisco, where golden sunsets spilled across the bay and art galleries buzzed with conversation, praise, and opportunity. And though she moved confidently through exhibitions and interviews, presenting her work with professional grace, a part of her remained anchored to late-night messages from Chicago, where Daniel navigated boardroom tensions and budget negotiations with relentless focus, his waterfront project hanging in delicate balance as investors debated risks and returns. Their communication became both lifeline and mirror, brief video calls scheduled across time zones, shared laughter echoing through screens, moments of vulnerability surfacing in quiet admissions of exhaustion. And yet, beneath the warmth, lingered subtle insecurities neither fully voiced, because distance has a way of amplifying small doubts into larger questions. One evening after a particularly successful gallery showing, Amelia found herself surrounded by fellow artists celebrating potential collaborations in Los Angeles, the air thick with ambition and possibility. And when a charismatic curator suggested extending her stay for additional opportunities, she hesitated, her excitement colliding with the silent awareness that more time away meant stretching the fragile thread connecting her to Daniel. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Daniel faced mounting pressure as a rival firm intensified its bid to overshadow his design, forcing him into aggressive negotiations that left little room for emotional reflection. And when he missed a scheduled call with Amelia later that night, the disappointment in her voice was subtle yet unmistakable, not accusatory, but wounded, a reminder that even understanding hearts can feel neglected. The tension surfaced gradually, not through arguments, but through pauses, conversations that ended a little sooner than usual, reassurances that sounded slightly rehearsed, and both began to wonder whether they were holding on to something that might be slipping beyond their control. Yet love, when genuine, rarely surrenders without resistance, and so they chose honesty over avoidance during a particularly candid call under separate night skies, Amelia standing on a quiet beach in Santa Monica with waves crashing behind her, while Daniel leaned against his apartment window overlooking Lake Michigan, city lights shimmering like distant constellations. She admitted her fear of becoming secondary to his career, of being admired but not prioritized, while he confessed his struggle to balance ambition with emotional availability, acknowledging that he had never before needed to integrate someone into his carefully structured life. Their conversation did not resolve everything instantly, but it stripped away pretense, replacing uncertainty with mutual awareness that both were learning how to love without losing themselves. As days turned into weeks, they found rhythm in small rituals, sending photos of daily moments, sunrise over the Pacific meeting sunrise over the Midwest, shared playlists that carried fragments of presence across miles, and Daniel surprised her by booking a weekend flight to Los Angeles once a critical investor meeting concluded successfully, choosing to step away from spreadsheets and presentations to stand beside her in person. When Amelia saw him waiting outside her gallery venue, dressed simply rather than in his usual tailored formality, relief and joy overtook hesitation, and their embrace felt less like reunion and more like affirmation that what they were building could withstand temporary separation. During that weekend together, they walked along Venice Beach, laughter mingling with ocean breeze, discussed long-term dreams without disguising ambition as compromise, and acknowledged that their paths might not always align geographically, but could align intentionally if both remained willing to communicate rather than assume. Daniel admitted he had begun redefining success, realizing that professional achievements felt incomplete without someone to share them with, and Amelia revealed she no longer viewed independence as isolation, but as strength she could bring into partnership rather than defend against it. When the weekend ended and Daniel returned to Chicago, the goodbye carried less fear and more confidence because they had confronted distance directly rather than allowing it to quietly erode connection. Back home, Daniel poured renewed focus into securing final approval for the waterfront project, inspired by the possibility of designing spaces where stories like theirs might begin, while Amelia completed the final leg of her tour with clarity that her journey did not require choosing between career and love, only balancing both with intention. As autumn approached and Amelia prepared to return permanently to Chicago, anticipation replaced anxiety, and Daniel stood once again beneath the city skyline, where their first collision had changed everything, reflecting on how far they had traveled emotionally since that rainy night. When Amelia finally stepped through airport arrivals into his waiting arms, there was no lingering doubt, only recognition that growth had strengthened rather than fractured their bond. Back home, Daniel poured renewed focus into securing final approval for the waterfront project, inspired by the possibility of designing spaces where stories like theirs might begin, while Amelia completed the final leg of her tour with clarity that her journey did not require choosing between career and love, only balancing both with intention. As autumn approached and Amelia prepared to return permanently to Chicago, anticipation replaced anxiety, and Daniel stood once again beneath the city skyline, where their first collision had changed everything, reflecting on how far they had traveled emotionally since that rainy night. When Amelia finally stepped through airport arrivals into his waiting arms, there was no lingering doubt, only recognition that growth had strengthened rather than fractured their bond. Challenges still existed, careers remained demanding, but they had discovered that fate might introduce two people by chance, yet commitment sustains them by choice. And as they drove back toward the city lights reflecting against Lake Michigan, hands intertwined with quiet certainty, both understood that love was not measured by uninterrupted proximity, but by the courage to evolve together even when circumstances demanded temporary separation. Because sometimes the true unfolding of a love story is not in grand declarations, but in steady resilience, in choosing again and again to remain connected despite shifting landscapes, and in trusting that intertwined destinies can stretch without breaking when guided by honesty, respect, and shared determination.